The old house stood silently in the valley, its windows like vacant eyes staring blankly ahead. It looked like any other abandoned dwelling, worn and weathered by time, unnoticed by the world. But appearances could be deceiving, because this house was far from ordinary, for within its dusty rooms and corridors lurked secrets so chilling they would make your blood run cold. It was here that Daniel and Emma, brother and sister, were about to stumble upon a realm where shadows danced at the edge of perception, where whispers echoed tales of sorrow and despair. They had come across the house while hiking in the area. Curiosity piqued. They decided to explore. Little did they know they were about to breach a threshold into a world they couldn't comprehend. The siblings cautiously approached the house, their footsteps echoing eerily in the oppressive silence. As they drew closer, the boundary between the real world and the shadowy realm became blurred. With trembling hands, Daniel pushed open the creaking door. Inside, a musty odor hung heavy in the air, mingling with the scent of decay and dust. The siblings, armed with nothing but their wits and a flickering flashlight, ventured deeper into the house. Each room they explored was a testament to a life once lived and abruptly ended. As they moved through the shadowy labyrinth, they began to experience strange phenomena. Unexplainable drafts, sudden temperature drops, disembodied whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. These unsettling occurrences were not mere tricks of their imagination. They were tangible manifestations of the house's dark history. In the parlor, they saw the shadow of a woman in a Victorian nightgown standing by the window, her back to them. She seemed lost in thought, her form shimmering like a mirage. Startled, the siblings hid behind a tattered armchair, watching as the shadow slowly turned, revealing a face of unimaginable sorrow. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the apparition vanished, leaving them in suffocating darkness. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and perhaps a touch of youthful arrogance, they decided to spend the night in the house, determined to uncover its secrets. As the first tendrils of darkness crept in through the broken window panes, the siblings huddled together, listening intently. The house seemed to sigh, its timbers groaning under the weight of untold stories. Then it began. At first, it was a low rumble, like the distant growl of a wild animal. Then the floorboards beneath them began to shake. With a suddenness that stole their breath, the house rumbled and shook violently. Walls cracked, windows shattered, and the siblings found themselves trapped in a nightmare made real. As the earth trembled around them, the siblings clung to each other, their terror palpable in the suffocating darkness. The house was alive, its malevolent spirit unleashed. They ran desperately through the labyrinthine halls, their screams swallowed by the oppressive silence of the house. But as the night wore on, the intensity of the tremors gradually subsided, leaving behind an eerie quiet that was more terrifying than the chaos that preceded it. Exhausted and terrified, they collapsed on a dusty floor, unsure if they had survived the night or merely endured its horrors. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the gloom, casting long, distorted shadows on the wall, they fled the house, stumbling out into the crisp morning air. Gasping for breath, they never looked back, driven by the primal urge to escape the clutches of the relentless shadows that haunted their waking hours. But the old house remained, silent and watchful, its secrets buried deep within its crumbling walls. For those who dared to enter its domain, the boundaries between reality and illusion dissolved, leaving only a haunting reminder of the day the shadows came alive. In a quiet part of the city stood an old house. Rumors about it were strange and scary. Some people claimed that at night they heard eerie sounds coming from inside. Others said they saw shadowy figures moving in the windows. Most people believed that the house was empty, but those who lived nearby shook their heads. No one should live in that house, they warned. It's haunted. One day, Daniel and Emma moved with their parents into a new neighborhood. Their house was nice, even if it was a little small, and right across from their house stood the same old building. During the day, it looked like any other house, but once night fell, the windows rattled and the doors creaked as if moved by unseen hands. Daniel had always been curious. When he learned about the house's spooky reputation, he couldn't help himself. He often asked his new friend Ben, who lived in the neighboring house, "Do you think there really are ghosts there?" But Ben always just shook his head and smiled. "No way," he said. "It's just an old house. It makes all those sounds because of the wind." Daniel wasn't convinced, though. He felt a creepy vibe from the house. One afternoon, while everyone else was out, Daniel was home alone. He sat at the window and watched the house across the street. The wind was calm, But suddenly he heard a loud bang, as if something heavy had fallen. Daniel held his breath and listened. Then he heard it again, a slow and heavy thud, followed by a dull crash. Could it really be ghosts? Daniel wanted to find out. So he crept closer to the window and peered out. He could see into the overgrown garden. But the first thing he noticed was that the window of the old house was slightly ajar. What was that noise? Was it the wind? Curiosity overcame him and he decided to go over and take a look. He slipped on his shoes and opened the back door. As soon as he stepped outside, he quickly regretted it. Daniel hadn't realized just how big the garden was. It was full of weeds and bushes. Thorny branches scratched at him as he walked between them. But Daniel pressed on. He had to know what had made that noise. As he got closer, he could see that the noise had come from a small shed in the corner. Its paint was peeling, and its roof tiles were missing. Taking a deep breath, Daniel pushed the door open. Inside was a pile of broken furniture and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. But there was nothing that looked out of place. Daniel checked behind a dusty wardrobe, under a wobbly table, and even inside a battered mirror. But he couldn't find anything. Just as he was about to give up, he noticed something. A floorboard creaked under his weight, and as he moved, another one did too. He stepped back and examined the floor. Then he knelt down and pushed aside some loose boards. Underneath was a dark hole, and when he shone his flashlight in, he saw that it led to a tunnel. Suddenly, Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea this was here. What was this tunnel? And where did it lead? Before he knew it, he was crawling through the opening. The air grew colder as he went deeper. He crawled forward until the tunnel opened up into a large room. Gasping for breath, Daniel stood up. He was in a labyrinth beneath the house, and although he couldn't see much in the dim light, he could tell that the walls were lined with shelves. On top of them were stacks of old books, yellowed manuscripts, and countless artifacts made of bone. Here and there, strange symbols were carved into the wall. Then Daniel saw something that made him freeze. A hunched figure was sitting in a chair in the corner, shrouded in darkness. It turned its head, and two glowing eyes stared straight at him. Screaming, Daniel turned and ran. He didn't know how long he ran for, but eventually he broke through a wall at the end of the tunnel and found himself back in the shed. Breathless, he stumbled out into the fresh air. When Daniel told his friend Ben about his discovery, he didn't believe him. "There's no way," he said. "Let's go check it out." Together they snuck into the house and searched every room. Of course, they couldn't find anything because most of the house had been cleared out. The only unusual things they found were these two: a heavy wooden box hidden under the floorboards and a secret passageway behind a bookshelf. Inside the box was an ancient-looking book. Its pages were filled with strange symbols and text. "Wow," said Ben. "What does it say?" "I don't know," replied Daniel. "But let's go ask Uncle Sam." Mr. Clayton, aka Uncle Sam, was an expert on ancient relics. Maybe he could help them decipher the book. When they showed the book to Mr. Clayton, he became very excited. "This is incredible," he said. "It looks like an ancient grimoire." A grimoire is a book of magic. Mr. Clayton said it was probably very dangerous. "We should get rid of it," he suggested. But Daniel and Ben disagreed. "No way," they both said. "We want to read it ourselves." After Daniel and Ben had finished school, they met up again. They were going to try to unlock the secrets of the book together. "Hey, Ben," said Daniel. "Do you think the ghosts from the old house are real?" "Of course not," replied Ben. "Stop being such a scaredy cat." But Daniel knew that Ben was just saying that. He could sense that his friend was just as curious as he was. They opened the book and began reading. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the room. The windows rattled and the candle on the table sputtered. Daniel and Ben looked at each other. Then they started reading louder. The wind grew stronger, and the candle flame danced wildly in the draft. And then it happened. The room began to darken, and the air grew colder. Daniel and Ben stopped reading. They didn't know what was happening. A moment later, the bookshelf in front of them began to shake. The books fell to the floor with a loud crash, and when the dust settled, Daniel and Ben were frozen with fear. In front of them was a gaping black hole where the bookshelf had been. With trembling hands, they reached out and touched it. "Do you think it's real?" whispered Ben. Daniel had no idea how to answer. He felt as if he were about to step through the portal and enter another world. His heart was pounding in his chest. Together, they took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. They had no idea what lay ahead of them, but they were ready for anything. The old house loomed over them, dark and menacing against the stormy sky. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the boarded-up windows and the decaying roof. Inside, the siblings huddled together, seeking comfort in their shared fear. "Let's get this over with," whispered Ben, his voice shaking. He was the older brother, but only by a year. And tonight, he felt more like a little brother. Their parents had always warned them about the house at the end of the street, the house where nobody ever went because it was filled with darkness. But now, with their friends daring them on, they were on their way to find out if the stories were true. The next night, unable to resist their curiosity, the siblings crept into the old house. They pushed open the door. It creaked open on its own, revealing a dusty hallway. A single candle flickered on the wall, casting long shadows that danced around them. Emma gasped. On the walls, she saw drawings of children, each one marked with a red cross. Then from upstairs, they heard the sound of children's laughter. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't like a normal house. Slowly, they made their way through the darkness into the main room. Cobwebs brushed against their faces as they walked. Suddenly, a rocking chair began to rock gently back and forth. Emma and Ben froze, their eyes wide with fear. Was there someone else in the house? Then they heard a voice. "I've been waiting for you." Startled, they turned around to see an old woman emerge from the shadows. Her eyes glowed a menacing red in the darkness. Emma trembled. Who are you?" The old woman snarled. "This house is mine, and whoever enters never leaves." The candle flickered again, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. And then they saw them, the shadows of children, their faces twisted in pain, reaching out as if trying to escape their prison. Terror gripped Emma and Ben. They wanted to run, to escape the suffocating grip of fear that seemed to be closing in on them. But their legs felt heavy, their bodies rooted to the spot. The old woman cackled, her voice echoing around them, bouncing off the walls like a death knell. "You shouldn't have come here," she croaked, her eyes gleaming with a terrible light. "Now you'll never leave." She shuffled closer, her gnarled hands outstretched. Suddenly Ben found his voice. "Let me go," he screamed, struggling against the invisible force that held him. The woman recoiled as if surprised by his defiance. A flicker of something like fear crossed her face, quickly replaced by a snarl. She raised her hands, and the rocking chair behind her toppled over with a loud crash. "You cannot escape your fate," she rasped, her eyes boring into them. "This house will claim you as its own." As she advanced, the shadows on the walls writhed and twisted, forming a circle around the siblings. Hope. They had to get out of there. But the front door, which had been open when they entered, was now closed, its surface black and featureless as if it had always been shut. Panic surged through Emma and Ben. They ran for the window, but that was blocked by a solid wall of darkness. Trapped. The old woman was upon them, her face inches away from theirs. "Don't blame me," she hissed, her breath hot and foul in their faces. "Blame the children whose souls are trapped within these walls, forever wailing, forever seeking release." Then, as quickly as she had appeared, the old woman vanished into the shadows, leaving Emma and Ben in total darkness. They were alone in the house with the ghosts, and they knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that they would never leave. The old woman's riddle echoed in Daniel's mind. What is the one thing that grows the more you share it? He glanced at Emma, her face pale and drawn, the urgency in his voice when he spoke. "We have to get out of here." They had been trapped in that room for what felt like hours, though the sun outside had only begun to set. Suddenly, a faint scratching sound reached their ears. It grew louder, then a small hole appeared in the wall right in front of them. The hole expanded, revealing a dark passage beyond. Daniel and Emma stared at each other, fear and hope battling in their eyes. Was this their way out, or was it a trick? The scratching grew louder, becoming a gaping hole. The passage seemed to beckon them, promising freedom from the old woman and her riddles. But was it a trap? Daniel and Emma exchanged a worried glance. Trusting the darkness was a risk, but staying put meant remaining in the clutches of the enigmatic old woman. The decision hung between them, heavy with peril and uncertainty. As the minutes ticked by, the urgency to escape the old woman's clutches grew stronger. Daniel and Emma finally decided to flee. Hand in hand, they stepped into the unknown, venturing through the hole in the wall and disappearing from sight. The darkness enveloped them, thick and suffocating, as they moved deeper into the passage. The air grew colder, sending shivers down their spines. The darkness seemed to press against them, whispering secrets they weren't meant to hear. But their fear was outweighed by their desire to escape the old woman's clutches. Then a faint light flickered ahead, offering a glimmer of hope in the oppressive darkness. As they moved towards it, the light grew brighter, revealing a staircase that spiraled upwards. With renewed determination, they began to climb, each step taking them closer to freedom. Suddenly, the old woman's voice echoed through the passage, jolting them with its suddenness. "You can leave, only if you answer my final riddle." Her words sent a chill down their spines, reminding them of the danger that still lurked. But Daniel and Emma pressed on, their determination to escape unyielding. As they reached the top of the stairs and turned to flee, the old woman appeared before them, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. In her hand, she held her staff, its tip glowing ominously. "What is the one thing that grows the more you share it?" The question hung in the air, heavy with menace. Emma, her voice barely a whisper, responded, "Love." The old woman let out a deafening scream. "Wrong answer!" she shrieked, raising her staff. "You shall remain here forever." The tip of the staff flared, bathing the room in an eerie light. But instead of trapping Daniel and Emma, the light began to consume the old woman. Her screams echoed as her form started to dissolve into wisps of smoke. The room shook violently, the walls crumbling. Daniel and Emma watched in awe as the old woman's essence dissipated, leaving behind only a faint, acrid smell. The tremors intensified, threatening to swallow them whole. Frantically, they ran outside, and as they stumbled out into the open, they saw the house shudder violently. The roof caved in, sending a spray of dirt and debris into the air. With a final shudder, the house seemed to melt into the ground, disappearing as if it had never been there. Gasping for breath, Daniel and Emma clung to each other, shaken but unharmed. Around them, the neighborhood was waking up to a beautiful, cloudless morning. Birds sang cheerfully, and the air was fresh and sweet. But Daniel and Emma knew the truth. Some secrets are best left buried, and the old woman's house was one of them.